former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi has expressed deep concern over what he described as Nigeria's rapidly growing debt profile. In a statement on his X handle, Obi warned that the country's fiscal trajectory could compromise future generations and worsen living conditions for millions of citizens. His warning comes 1 week after the Senate approved a fresh wave of borrowing for the country. Now, according to Obi, the latest approvals, in addition to 750.98 billion naira domestic bond issuance and a 65 million euros grant, brings the nation's total public debt to approximately 187 trillion naira, with projections suggesting it could exceed 200 trillion naira by year end. Femi Onakore is an economic expert and MD CEO of Engine Value Nigeria Limited. He joins us now to unpack the economic situation. Thank you for being here. Peter Obi's concerns have been widely shared, but what could be the implication of Nigeria's debt rising to 200 trillion if it indeed does?
Good evening. I think first it is important that we understand the situation. In economic terms, we need to unravel what it means to have a debt position and the implication of the debt in terms of its profile, the redemption obligations, and the utility or expected outcome of the debt. In Nigeria's case, we have a significantly high debt to GDP ratio of close to over 50%. However, the real challenge we should be thinking about is our infrastructure deficit. A report that circulated for a long time that many people are aware says that Nigeria needs an injection of $100 billion annually over a span of 30 years. That's $100 billion annually over a span of 30 years to bridge the infrastructure deficit. Now, if you look at our debt position, our revenue position, our GDP, what you realize is that we have a huge revenue problem. And if you want to drive revenue, you have to stimulate it. You have to create the conditions, the environment for it to thrive. So in our case, I do not think that we have a situation of excessive borrowing. In my honest opinion, I believe that Nigeria is actually underutilizing its ability to actually leverage its position in terms of driving towards development, the kind of development we want. We want dividends of development, but we are also shy of some of the parts, the process towards getting those development that we're looking for, the progress that we're searching. For example, America, a country that we usually try to point to and use as leverage in comparison, has over 120% debt to GDP ratio. And it still has a shortfall in terms of infrastructure requirements of up to $3.7 trillion. If you consider the scale and where they are currently and the scale of their infrastructure deficit they're trying to bridge across the country, you will see that Nigeria is actually quite far behind. Regarding the approved loan, some things need to be brought to fore. Number one, it is the fact that in the appropriation of the 2025 budget, this particular loan was already captured. It is not something that was new or fresh or ad hoc. It was planned within the framework of the budget of the year, and access to the approval of the Senate with access to the loan, which would help us to increase budget utilization, because funds should be available to run it.
Mr. Nakare, I'm trying to understand you from a very layman perspective. Are you saying that Mr. Peter Obi's concerns might be a bit overbloated and Nigeria is actually under borrowing?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that some of these social media comments regarding the economy, they're just politicization of very real issues that affect very real Nigerians. as it were, the things in the country, all projections by leading experts globally are saying that the country is moving in the right direction. Our ratings are improving across, different platforms, global respected platforms such as Moody, in different indices. Our exposure to forex disparity has reduced as a country. We have more stability and become more of an investment haven. However, if you're attracting investment, you need to provide infrastructure to support such investment. And our revenue profile is actually quite limited. Like I said, if we are projected to have to need actually $100 billion in terms of infrastructure investment annually over a span of 30 years for us to move, get out of the deficit position, then I think that Nigeria, as it is, it's not pushing its potential, especially with the opportunity available. As a country, our deep, resources, our deep human capital, there are resources that, can be tapped, but without the right infrastructure support, it's going to be difficult, and our revenue cannot really push it. So, how do you raise the revenue to drive the economy, to put those things in place? You need to borrow. And when you compare, yes, we are over as per the IMF concern of, like, I think 22.5% thereabout. Debt to GDP. We're doing like 60 or, about 50 thereabout. But like I pointed out, the United States, a country that we admire immensely as the country, we like to model ourselves against, like to aspire towards, is over 120% in terms of exposure. And they still have a deficit spanning $3.7 trillion to fix. It says a lot about where we are. And
okay, let me bring it down again. Let me bring it down again to Mr. Peter Obi's concerns, because he raised them, and we really need to get your perspective on his thought. He does agree. He says borrowing is not inherently bad if it is sustainable and tied to productive investment with measurable outcomes. Unfortunately, according to him, this current pattern of borrowing without accountability, without transparency, and without what he describes as transformational impact is simply mortgaging the future of the Nigerian children. How do you exactly assess this point of view?
Thank you very much. I will reiterate from an informed position. I think that is just a politicization of the real issues. If the concern were about budget or loan utilization, then it would be valid. And we can talk about accountability and transparency. We can talk about monitoring processes and techniques and tools, to watch how things and monitor how things pan out. However, in this scenario, it is just a lot of, I think, panic mongering. Regarding the.
So are you saying that the borrowing that this administration is taking on is sustainable and productive in terms of tangible investments, and that there will be adequate return and we will pay back in good time?
So there are processes to getting loan approval. And the loanee, as it were, creates, there's a template for borrowing. So if I'm going to borrow from an international institution, there are condition precedents for drawdown. And most of these loans are also tied to projects and, measurable action projects that there are external supervisory bodies monitoring. So it's not as if there are loans that are in vacuum. For example, in the recently approved one, $3 billion was approved for the Eastern Railway project, Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, which I think is, if implemented and done properly, it create a platform for prosperity for future generations. Like I said, the important thing is to build a foundation for growth. If we have a revenue challenge, then let's build foundations for growth. And if we're taking loans against this position, then let's talk about the utilization of the loans and the downline, trickle-down effect of such loans in terms of it is well utilized.
Mr. Nokoya Onakore, I hope I got that right. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
All right.